this meeting so that people who miss it can see it later. I am Jane Perry, chairman of the Cameron Commons Education Committee. And this was to be our fourth of 4 forums this year. And we have recently decided to add a fifth. Given all the information, all the discussion on our listserv about options for internet, TV, and telephone services, we have secured an expert to come and give us a talk on the subject, and that will be on Tuesday, May 11th. So that will be our 5th forum. But this is a 4th for this year, and it's the 6th year that Cameron Commons has been doing these forums. We would ask you turn on your videos just so that your friends and neighbors can see you. It's more like we're in person, but we'll leave it up to you because, as I said earlier, we are recording the meeting. In the chat, you will see we're going to post a feedback link. If you hit that link, it'll take you to a form we ask you to fill out. It's very quick, 2 questions, well, 2 questions, and then a 3rd place where you can put comments, recommendations, any kind of feedback you want to give us. We definitely use that, we welcome it, and we go and look at what people have suggested when we decide what to do in our programs for the next year. So we'd appreciate that. Our presenters tonight are happy to answer questions, but we ask that you post them in the chat, and they will answer them at the end. And then also at the end, if we have time and you haven't put it in the chat, we can take questions out loud. I am now going to mute everyone. You'll be able to unmute yourself later when we have questions and discussions, but I'm going to mute everyone and turn it over to Judy Setliff, who is going to introduce our speakers.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker and Cameron.
Oh no. Judy.
Judy, you need to unmute. In the muting all, we all got it muted, and
There we go. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So tonight I'm delighted to announce our speaker and Cameron Park neighbor, Myrick Howard. He's a Durham relative. He attended Brown University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he received his master's degree in city planning and a law degree in 1978. Since completing his law degree, he has been president of Preservation North Carolina, which is the state's only private nonprofit preservation organization. PNC is one of the nation's largest and most prestigious preservation organizations and is referred to as a premier statewide preservation organization in the South, if not the nation, according to the National Park Service. The Preservation North Carolina also owns and operates Bellamy, I'm sorry. Did I pronounce that right? Bellamy? Thank you. Mission Museum of History and Design Arts in Wilmington, one of the state's most important architectural landmarks. Myrick has lived in Cameron Park since 1978 and has renovated 3 houses in the neighborhood. He now lives in an historic duplex on Oberlin Road. Throughout the years, Myrick has received a number of statewide awards, including induction into the Order of the Longleaf Pine. As if his list of accomplishments was not enough, he also teaches a graduate seminar on historic preservation planning each year at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Myrick will talk about some of the unexpected findings within the Oberlin project. He will also talk about preservation easements, a tool that can be used to permanently protect our historic homes in Cameron Park, and will provide a glimpse of life in the early development of Oberlin Village with Miss Andrea Fields. Please welcome Myrick and Andrea.
thank you. And it's a real pleasure for me to have Andrea with us tonight. got to know her through the process of renovating the Graves Fields house on Oberlin Road. And what I'm going to be talking primarily about is how that project developed, and then Andrea will come in and talk a little bit about growing up here, and I'll probably bug her with some questions, and she is perfectly free to bug me with questions too. So I'll give Andrea's has spent her life and career as an educator. She went to Winston-Salem State University. She taught 5th grade, community college, fourth grade, taught computers. She's done all sorts of work as an educator, and she's what I would call a pistol, and that's from my standpoint a great thing. So looking forward to having some conversation with Andrea and her thoughts about Oberlin. I'm going to tell you a little about the project that we've done in Oberlin. So let me go to share screen. And for those of you who've seen this before, I'm sorry, but you know, if you see it enough, maybe you can give the presentation. And I hope some of you will also have seen the TV show we did about Oberlin, which is a lot more about Oberlin per se, and about the project. And Mike put it on a link for it on the announcement about the meeting. So I hope if you haven't seen it, we did last year as broadcast on UNC TV. And I think people have found it really interesting. We're working on 3 more. Oh boy. So let me share screen here. And just a second. So, slide that up. Okay. We are now at Oberlin Road with the new headquarters office for Preservation North Carolina, and we moved. We got our certificate of occupancy from the city after just a horrible experience of dealing with it. It was a crazy project, didn't fit any of the boxes. And we got our certificate of occupancy a matter of about 6 weeks before COVID. So we haven't even put all the pictures up on the wall yet. I walk to work and have a lovely office. And let's see if this thing is going to cooperate. Yeah, and let me give you a moment information about what we do at Preservation North Carolina, because these buildings fit into that. We jokingly refer to ourselves as the animal shelter for historic preservation. We're dealing with the poor puppies and kitty cats that nobody else wants. They're, as in, we acquire properties that are in trouble, and then our normal course of things is to find buyers who will take them from us and restore and take care of them. We don't want to keep these animals for ourselves. Generally speaking, we want someone else to take ownership and responsibility under protective covenants. And we've done that. We now have protective covenants and/or easements on, as of this morning, 856 properties across the state. You know, our offices were downtown the Briggs building. On the left is a photograph of what the Briggs buildings looked like when we started, with the lovely concrete fountain out front that was really served more restroom purposes than decorative purposes, I'm sorry to say. We were doing the Briggs building as our office, where there at a point when there was not interest in downtown, and we helped, I think, stimulate that interest. We've been there too long trying to figure out where to move our office, and we looked at one thing or another, and realized that there were not just one, but two houses in Oberlin that were in trouble. Oberlin's absolutely fascinating. Was a freedman's village, as in people who are emancipated after the Civil War. By 1880, there were some 160 families living here, but by about 1910, 1920, there were 1,200, up to 1,200 people living here. And African-American community. It was really set up as a separate town, but they did not get incorporated. And someday some research is going to probably go and be able to determine why it was not incorporated. Was that a choice, or was that because of legislature not allowing it to happen? Oberlin got annexed, plus or minus 1922, 1924, annexed into the city of Raleigh. At that point, you had Cameron Park on one side, so to speak, and Hayes Barton on the other side. And I think it's pretty safe to say the white folks of Cameron Park and the white folks of Hayes Barton were concerned about this African-American community that was between them, and that thinking that the annexation would provide more control by the white people over what was going on. What it did end up doing was making people in Oberlin pay city taxes for the first time. And that was one of the beginnings of the end of Oberlin Village. So we were looking at two houses. The Plummer Hall house, it's a very small house. It's this, what you see there's about 600 square feet. And why it looks bigger, but it's scaled down. I mean, when you are on that front porch, I literally can stand there and touch the ceiling of that porch without stretching. It was scaled down to give a strong appearance from the street. Sweet little house. The part on the right was added on by the church, and it's a one room. It's almost freestanding. It connects to the other house just enough to have a doorway. And Reverend Hall was the minister, the founder and founding minister of what is now Oberlin Baptist Church. It started as First Baptist Church of Oberlin. Again, the thinking of Oberlin as a separate community from Raleigh. Then when that was added on the right, the little porch detail on the left was added on, and the house was extended out to the left as well. So it's quite small. And then we have the Graves-Fields house. Both of these houses being on the National Register, both of them being in trouble. The Graves house is really, it's built to the street. It makes a statement, but it's only 1,400 square feet. So it's not much bigger than the smallest houses of Cameron Park. In fact, 1,400 square feet is about the size of my unit of my duplex that was built in 1939. So again, it's scaled to look big. That was part of it. This was probably the most flamboyant house of Oberlin. There are really not many photographs of Oberlin, at least not that have been turned up in any great way. And when I say that, there are more photographs of people, not so much of the places. So Sweet House on the National Register, it was bought for, the property was bought for $500,000 by a developer. He made it very clear his plan was to tear the house down. So we're having this anxiety because there are only 5 remaining houses on the National Register in Oberlin. And of those 5 here too. So the Grace Fields house was called Oak Crest at the beginning when it was built by Willis Graves and his wife Eleanor. He was a brick mason. She was a teacher. She grew up in the house that's Russ Stevenson's house. Interestingly, that house has been moved back, changed in orientation, added onto, etc. But that was the Haywood house, and Eleanor, or it was the Haywood house. Her father was a Hinton. Her brother was the Haywood, her brother-in-law. They named the house Oak Crest, which I always found interesting. And I mean, from what I've read and seen about Willis Graves, I have to kind of think he was also, Andrea, in the category of pistol, in the absolutely great sense of things. I have a feeling there's well, if white folks can name their plantation houses, why can't we name our houses too? So the irony with us with Preservation North Carolina is we have worked with every manner of oak, shady oaks, Oak Grove, Oakley Grove, you name it. If it's got oak in the name, we've worked with them somewhere, somehow, and they're all plantation houses except for Oak Crest, and shows up on the maps of the early 20th century as Oak Crest. These are photographs from before the renovation. Actually, photographs from really more than 10 years ago, done by David Strevel and the Capital City Camera Club, which has been very helpful to us. The house was in considerably worse condition by the time we took it over, because the fields had already moved out and it was sitting vacant, and every minute a house that's vacant is a problem. We got this crazy lunatic idea of we'd move it, the 2 houses onto adjacent lots. The Hall house, the little Reverend Hall house, we just moved back. And the Grace house, we moved from one side of Oberlin Baptist Church to the other side. We had to, the lots are very trapezoidal. And it's funny, when you come over here, you'll note the sidewalk to the Hall house is actually on the neighbor's property out front. It was a real squeeze to get these 2 houses onto the lots. And then we had to do a connector between the 2 houses underground in order to make the 2 houses work as one house from a zoning standpoint, as one structure, so that we could do one electrical service, one plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. Also made a difference in terms of setbacks. When early on in the process, we had paint research done. I'm a great believer when you restore a house, have paint research done, and that saves you a hell of a lot of trouble deciding what color you want to paint it. The colors came out like this, and I'd show this to people, and people go, "Oh my God, this is gonna be so awful. It's gonna be so dark. You're not gonna like it." It's kind of like original colors. One of the things that's particularly interesting is that the original colors on the Graves house are the same colors as the Executive Mansion trim. The Executive Mansion brick, of course, was trimmed out in 2 shades of basically olive green, and there were some maroon and some black. So Willis Graves is building his house at the same time the Executive Mansion is being built, and he is using the same colors as the Executive Mansion. I think it was making quite the statement. So the Hall house had, in the 1990s, had an addition built on it. Now this says something about construction. The addition was built, but no one had done anything in terms of termite treatment during the period of its, from the time it got renovated to the time we took it over. It's that vacant, so it had all the moisture of the world inside the house. All this trim, all this termite damage you see there is all in new wood. You see new wood, old wood. The old wood is somewhat damaged. The new wood is just eaten to pieces. This is the porch ceiling, which was a replacement ceiling. And you can see when you have that kind of termite damage in the ceilings, you know that you've got a problem. So the addition we could not keep, and I'm someone who does not like to put anything more into a landfill than I have to. We certainly would have adaptively used the interior of it, but it was truly shot because the house is all but sitting on the ground. Now this is the little addition that the Baptist men or the Baptist church people built, probably men. And it was sitting on the ground, but that's old wood, and for the most part, it survived 140, 150 years of sitting on the ground. The new part, 1990s part, did not do so well. We found things like there with the Graves Fields house, the back 2 rooms of the house were actually an earlier house. Graves was a mason, so you think he would do better than this, but then we came to a realization that he would not have done that. It was already done prior to his buying the house. We don't know the story of the earlier house, which is only going to be earlier by a tune of 10 or 15 years at most. Houses got all sorts of weird things in terms of structure. Here's an example of one. This is the porch ceiling. There's the porch, the blue porch ceiling. So it comes around and under the tower that's on the front right-hand side of the house. And they took a porch post from somewhere else and used it as a structural support. They used what they could get their hands on. Here upstairs is I can say a little bit of an extreme example of this. Andrea, this is the hallway wall of the bedroom on the right as you're facing the house upstairs. And we knew that we kept finding things like floor joists that went across but didn't connect to the plate on the side. So it's just sort of hanging out there. And we found all sorts of issues like that. And here's a case where find the stud in this wall that actually goes from the floor to the ceiling. Well, there's not one. And that's most likely the house was built with materials that were left over on the job site. I kind of use the analogy. It's like going to Habitat Restore every day and building your house out of what you could find at the Habitat Restore. And some days you found good stuff, some days not so much. But we found, I mean, there's enough wood here to connect the lath for plaster, but there's not a single joist that goes from top to bottom. And in some cases, they don't even pretend to make it. In other cases, they're using just sistered on materials to make it work. So it was a wonky house from a structural standpoint, which meant we really had to really fundamentally rebuild the structure inside the walls and underneath the house, and to a certain degree the roof structure as well. The whole house had the termite damage, and we were just, I mean, if you look there, you can see brand new sills running all across the front porch. We moved it, as I said, up and over on the same lot, and then we took the Graves Fields house around the back of the church. We were really fortunate to be able to do that because that meant we didn't have to deal with streets and power lines. One of the most expensive things in dealing with a move of structures is power lines. And here we have major feeder lines on Oberlin Road. Anybody who's driven down Oberlin Road last few days knows that a lot of infrastructure issues are being addressed right now, but there are huge lines out front. And it would have cost us tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if we had to take the house out onto the street and bring it back in. We would have probably had to cut the house down in half to the first floor and the second floor to move separately, most likely. Now, what was interesting to me in particular, and Andres didn't get a chance, trust me, with the grades, okay, the National Register nomination says Willis Graves, brick mason, and his wife Eleanor Hinton built the house. Got maybe a couple of paragraphs, says that their sons went off went north as brick masons and carpenters, and we found that there's so much more to the story. Part of why that story wasn't revealed was that when the National Register nomination was done, the internet was not as available, and you didn't have newspapers.com, you didn't have all sorts of public records online that you could go to. But this was kind of interesting. It was 1876. Willis Graves was probably 20 years old, and the big celebration was normally on January 1. You had Emancipation Day on January 1. It was celebrated by African Americans throughout the country. It was a very big deal until plus or minus 1930. And we found Willis Graves was very involved with that. His sons were very involved. But this is sort of fascinating where the church, the Sunday schools of the African American churches in 1876 are gathering at Capitol Square to form a procession and join the Oberlin School folks between there and downtown Raleigh and proceeding to the fairgrounds. Well, the fairgrounds were where Raleigh Little Theater is now. And one of the things that's very interesting is there was a group that Willis Graves was very involved with that ran the Colored State Fair every year. The Colored State Fair was a separate fair than the White State Fair. One was just before the other, and it was one of the big social events of the years. And here's a case where Eleanor, the wife, this is 10 years before they're married. So she was about 15 at the time. She is reading a poem, and Willis Graves is doing a oration about the condition of Sabbath schools in the United States. Sabbath schools, obviously. Sunday schools, we tend to forget that Sunday schools were how, in many cases, African Americans, and in many cases, working class and farm people learned how to read. It started as a school, primarily in the Methodist Church, as a school for people who couldn't go to school to learn how to read and other things. But here's Willis Graves as a young man, or really older teenager, giving a talk about Sabbath schools. He ran for public office at least 3 times that we know of. And this is 1898, November 8th, 1898. Okay, for those of you who have been following events, on November 10th was the Wilmington Massacre. News Observer had a very definite role in building the news. I'm going to use an analogy, and I try to be bipartisan and et cetera, but the News and Observer was to Wilmington 1898 what Fox News was to January 6, 2000, whatever year this is, 2011. Yeah. Where are we? What day is this? And when I say that, it was the News Observer was publishing a lot of fake news about how Black people were going to take over things, particularly Black men, and that white women were in danger. And here, let me read this for you. This is an article. Willis Graves is a Republican candidate for the legislature. Willis Graves, a very Black man with a voice like a foghorn, was the next speaker. He began with this salute to the human sea of inky faces before him. The white men are rallying their forces to the Democratic white man's ticket. I say to you, vote the Black man's ticket tomorrow. This was the burden of a long harangue from him and others. That's on the front page of the newspaper on November 8th, just literally 36 hours at best before the Wilmington race riot. Not Wilmington race riot, that's how we grew up calling it that, if you ever heard of it at all. It was the Wilmington Massacre. So keep going here. So his sons went north, but they did a little better than just going north as carpenters and brick masons. Lemuel Graves went to Cornell and then did graduate work at Columbia and became an educator and businessman. And Andre, I'll let you come in on this one. Lemuel Graves, who grew up in this house, was the first inductee in Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity.
Yes.
And for white folks, we don't know what that means.
Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity is known throughout African American colleges and universities. It is a very prestigious fraternity. Most alpha men, as they like to be called, are very, very smart, very intelligent, and they have a lot of drive. If you were dating someone, your mother wanted you to date an alpha man because he, quote, was going somewhere. He had something to do. Their symbol is the Sphinx. It is a widely known organization. Some very renowned people belong to it. And when I found out that he was the first inductee, initiate, I thought, oh my goodness, my brother too is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. So, you know, it kind of resonates that I grew up in a house where this was the first inductee, and my brother was, who went to Carolina undergrad, was also an alpha. So, I mean, it speaks volumes, and a lot of people, when people found out, you know, the connection between the house and the alphas, I got a lot of calls from a lot of people say, oh, you're kidding. I said, no, you know, and it's just phenomenal that the way that the parallel is between the Graves family and the Fields family. So, I mean, I learn something new every day, and I am just delighted to know that, you know, out of all of that, you know, the boards didn't fit and the posts didn't fit, and, you know, there were no joists, that good and greatness did come from that. And I think that alone speaks volumes.
Thank you. And Andre, I'm not sure I've said this to you, but according to the records, Lemuel designed the medal and wrote the Constitution.
Yeah, he did. And from what I gather from my friends who are alphas, he was called the genius behind the frat because he was very smart, very intelligent. If they gave him a task, it was done in no time, no hassle, no fuss, just do it. If you want something done, give it to Lemuel. And Lemuel did not disappoint.
Interesting, interesting. Lemuel was inducted into Who's Who in Colored America. And you can see his office was on 125 Hargett Street. That's down near where Remedy Diner used to be. And his residence was 605 Oberlin Avenue, which is where the BB&T is, across the street from Harris Teeter. And I've seen some aerial views. It was a very nice, very substantial house that Lemuel built there. Lemuel ended up going to move to Harlem with his family. Show you a picture of his family in a moment. As part of the Great Migration, they left here in the mid-1930s. They left 11 properties in tax foreclosure. They had plenty of money, which says to me they just left. And they probably figured that the houses really didn't have enough value to keep them in the South. They left. Willis went, the father went with them. Their mother had died, I think it was 1929. So they left. He became very involved with some of the most prominent people in New York. His business partner was one of the founders of the National Urban League. He went to church with Thurgood Marshall and Langston Hughes, and I mean, really important, notable folks. There's a lot more to be learned about him. And meantime, his brother, Bill, this is a photograph of Bill from 1947, plus or minus. Bill went to Howard Law School. He didn't go as a carpenter and brick mason. He went to Howard Law School and went from there to Detroit, became the attorney for NAACP Legal Defense Fund, took a number of cases to the Michigan Supreme Court, took the important case on racially restrictive covenants to the U.S. Supreme Court with Thurgood Marshall. Bill Graves is listed as one of the attorneys on that case. Part of the case was a Michigan case, part of it was a Missouri case, part of it was a DC case. This is him with the clients on racially restrictive covenants. This is his law partner. What's interesting is this couple bought the house because he could pass as a white man, and which is one more example of how race is so totally screwed up as a concept. He could pass as a white man. He bought the house and then was sued for buying it in violation of racially restrictive covenants. Here's the 1948 Pittsburgh Courier article on the subject. Major Supreme Court case. And what's interesting and doubly interesting here is that the writer of the article is Lem Graves Jr., his nephew. Lem Graves Jr., who grew up where the BB&T office is over here on Oberlin Road. Bill Graves is another one, listed who's who in colored America. And here's Lem Jr. is known as Gene. Here's Gene with President Truman. He was one of the first three African Americans to serve as correspondents who went on a trip with a U.S. president. No Black journalists had been allowed to travel with a president on a trip. And here's Gene. Gene went on to go to Paris. He was involved with the Marshall Plan. This is the family, the Graves family, as Gene is about to go to Paris with his wife and his daughter. This is Lemuel in the background, the father, and while in Paris, there are some fabulous photographs that were taken of Gene Graves at his workplace, at his home, and all around. You could put a subtext on these photographs of Black man in Paris. And he wrote quite a bit about his experiences there. And there's way more information about Gene Graves to be discovered. And don't you know, this photograph chafed white people in the United States. Here's a Black man doing dictation to the white secretary. They're fascinating photographs. Gene Graves, member number 3 in Who's Who in Colored America. I want to stop and say, nobody in Raleigh knew anything about the Graves anymore. They left here. They did well elsewhere. I've been in touch with their number of their descendants, a number of whom Andrea got to meet as well about a year ago. They're from Seattle and Chicago and Detroit and Washington, D.C. Well-educated, prominent, publicly involved, and we in Raleigh knew none of this, which has been kind of interesting. So here's the house approximately 1945 when the Fields family bought it. Andrea.
Okay, this is a picture of the tree on the left was destroyed by Hurricane Hazel. When Hurricane Hazel came, she took the tree with her, and unfortunately, and my grandfather loved that tree because he just loved the yard. My father grew up in Oxford, North Carolina. He walked from Oxford to Wake County with a pair of shorts on and shoes that had holes in the bottom. And he had newspapers in his shoes so that his feet wouldn't hurt or he wouldn't step on a rock or something that way. There's a picture. This is a picture of my aunts in the front. My grandmother is headed toward the back, and that's my grandfather. And before he did anything, he wanted to establish the gardens and the yards because being the son of a farmer with a large farm in Oxford, he just wanted to have something that was beautiful. Now, if you see in the front, you see that the 2 brick posts. There used to be lights in there, and eventually the lights came out because my grandfather said people, it didn't work out. They were falling, or someone was knocking them out. So he just put like little metal prods in there, and that's what was there. And it doesn't look like much of a yard there because they had just moved in, and he was working on it. And to your left, you see that white building. That was the Oberlin Baptist Church, but that was a church that was burned. The church, it was burned in a fire. And my aunt tells me that I was a little girl and that she smelled smoke, and she took me out. We saw what was happening, and people came from all over, the men especially, who tried to put the fire out because they were worried because the church was so close to the house. So that they were trying to save the house. My grandfather was popular, as was my grandmother. And people really respected them. He was a deacon and she was a deaconess. So people did what they could in those times. I mean, I was a little girl, but people did what they could to help their neighbors, and they looked out for one another. And if they could be of service to you in any shape, form, or fashion, they would do that. And this photo is very special to me because this was the house, and this is and you saw later with the aluminum siding how the house transitioned. And I wish you could see closer my grandmother, my grandfather, and my aunts. My grandfather, if I must say so myself, was a very handsome man. And my grandmother was attractive. She was a style maven. She loved clothes and pearls and handkerchiefs and so on and so on. And she was wearing, my grandmother passed, she was 95 years old. She passed 6 months after my father passed. And I do think she died from a broken heart because she had never been in a hospital a day in her life. And she was wearing high heel shoes at 95. So we had to talk about that. But I mean, it was just, you know, it was amazing. And I look at the house from here on your left-hand side, that was the bedroom of my two fun-loving, stylish aunts. Because my father was overseas, he was in the war. And on the right-hand side was that was the bedroom of my aunt, who is now 95. And the two stylish aunts would wear Evening in Paris cologne and red fox stockings, because I think all you could wear then, if you were Black, was red fox stockings and Evening in Paris cologne. And they had a lot of fun and frivolity coming from their bedrooms because they were always going someplace and doing something. My aunt Liv, whose bedroom was the right, was, you know, quiet and sedate. She would sneak and smoke cigarettes at night because she didn't think my granddaddy knew until I told him. And she would blow the smoke out of the window so he wouldn't smell it. So, I mean, you know, it was a lot of hijinks and it was a lot of fun, but I look at the house now, and when, you know, I found out it was on the 1,400 square feet, I mean, I was shocked because it always seemed much bigger than life to me. Yeah, and this is my grandfather. My grandfather worked for the Daniels. When he first came to Raleigh, he worked at NC State. He worked in the laundry. And I hope I don't offend anyone, but my grandfather was in the laundry, and if you were colored, you know, you work in the laundry or in food service. And he said they were up on the roof watching a baseball game. They had a break, and some people came out and shouted the N-word at them and told them to go back and work because N's were not supposed to be watching baseball. And I hate to say it because I'm grown and I know better. To this day, I am not a fan of North Carolina State because, I mean, that I didn't like it when he told me, and I still don't. When I talk about it, I just get a little antsy. And he worked at St. Mary's. He worked in the kitchen at St. Mary's for a while. And he met a friend who told him about a job he could get as a chauffeur. And that's when he started to work for Josephus Daniels, who at one time was Secretary of Navy and also Ambassador to Mexico. And I think I told this story before. My grandfather only drove Buicks. He loved Buicks. That was his favorite car. And they were on their way to Virginia they were going through Virginia because Mr. Daniels had to go to Congress. He had to deliver a message to Congress. And so he told my grandfather, he said, Spurgeon, you know, just step on it. We got to get there. We got to go. And that's all he had to say because he loved speed. And he was speeding. And a white police officer stopped them. And he told my grandfather, boy, why are you driving this car? And why are you driving so fast? I don't know whether he saw Mr. Daniels or not. So Mr. Daniels apparently just sat there. And he kept telling my grandfather, you know, you're not supposed to have a car like this. And people like you shouldn't be driving cars. You shouldn't be driving this fast. And eventually Mr. Daniels said, look, young man, my name is Josephus Daniels. I have a meeting with Congress in a few hours and we have to go. And the officer said, okay, sir, well, you know, who are you? And he told him, you know, he was Secretary of the Navy. He said, well, sir, have a good trip. And my grandfather was able to escape that. And on the way back, of course, he was speeding again. And they passed the same police officer and he waved. So what can I say? What can I say?
Well, actually, and one thing that is, I mean, that story in light of the last 48 hours in Minnesota, I mean, being pulled for a, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's a very sad
it is.
circumstances. Um, you and I've talked, well, actually, let's go here. Because
And
boy,
uh,
what a stylish crowd here.
yeah, well, I told you my grandmother was a style maker. That is my grandfather in the center, and he had a face that he wasn't too thrilled, and yeah, and he wasn't thrilled, and because he wasn't thrilled, that is me sitting at his knee, and that is my aunt Jeanette on the right hand side, and her husband, and that's my father standing behind my grandmother. And my aunt Liv and her husband Ed Haywood, they had gotten married, and they're behind. And then that's my mom on the left hand side, and this is my aunt Tish, who is sitting on the edge of the sofa. And this picture, everybody loves this picture. Everybody just thinks it's adorable. I still have that sofa. I've had it recovered, upholstered many times. I cannot part with it. My brother, my sister, everybody says, hey, send us the picture, send us the picture. We want the picture. This picture was used in a Bank of America commercial. My sister, when she left TV, she was vice president of a TV station in Jacksonville, Florida. She left TV and she came to Charlotte, and she worked in Bank of America corporate. And she used this photo as a legacy to show, how people can save and what they can do. And the people there also loved it as well. And these are some Bible school, vacation Bible school, BTU. Everything was always a big deal. And my grandmother liked to show off her crystal and her china and her flatware, her silver. And so, she'd have, kids would come over and take pictures on the front while the moms and grandmoms would be inside having tea and hors d'oeuvres. And of course, the kids would go in the backyard and do likewise. And a lot of these children at the time, this was, they went to Oberlin School. They went to Oberlin School. And this is the porch. Now, this on the side porch was a white metal swing. And I cannot tell you how many people of prominence and just regular people who sat in that swing. I mean, you could come on the driveway or walk past and you see anybody sitting on the swing. My grandfather loved the front porch, and so people were always welcome to come up. In front of the house, on either side, there were flower beds of beautiful flowers, all kinds. I mean, all kinds, you name it, he had it. And everybody would come and admire the flowers. And if they were, if they were friendly, because, if they liked my grandfather, they would drive into the driveway and park behind his Buick. And they'd ask him, well, what is that? What kind of flower was that? And he would tell them, oh, this is so-and-so. And he said, if you like, I will give you a cutting. So a lot of people stopped and they got cuttings of some of the flowers that grew in the yard. I mean, because it was a showpiece. He just loved he just loved flowers that were beautiful. He loved the smells. He loved the textures. Myrick knows about the flowers, and so do I. And some of the bushes. I mean, we took cuttings when the house was there, but that they even had meetings. They would have neighborhood meetings on the porch. People would stop by, and one or two, and then two or three others would join. And before you know it, they'd have meetings. They would just meet about different things and talk about things. And I'm sure they solved a lot of problems. My grandfather was a Mason, and the lodge was right across the street from the house. And so when the Masons had a meeting and he went to the meeting, a lot of his Mason brothers would come over and they'd sit on the porch as well.
Well, probably time for us to take questions. And Andrea, you wanna, anything else? You- What do you remember? Now, Cameron Village was already built before you were born.
Mhm.
And you would have, Wade Avenue, you would have been too young, too little to remember that coming through.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I know, my grandparents had friends, the persons, and a lot of people who lived on Wade Avenue after they just built it and just kind of basically destroyed the neighborhood.
Yeah.
They literally destroyed the neighborhood.
I teach class in Chapel Hill, and today's head speaker, Valerie Johnson, who's my vice chairman, who grew up in San Diego, and she was talking about, she calls it root shock. Actually, there's a book that's been written about it of people who are uprooted from their homes. Her home, which her parents were well educated, master's degree, etc. Her home was destroyed by a highway, and then but she was talking about the way highways got built through neighborhoods, and we certainly know about it in Durham. We know about it in Winston-Salem. We know about it in San Diego and Raleigh. It was the same story.
Yeah, it was a way to sabotage communities that people felt were too uppity or too much up and coming, because people of color were not supposed to be intelligent. They were not supposed to be smart. They were not supposed to be able to read. They were not supposed to be, quote, civilized. And so when you saw this threat, you had to find a way to lessen it. And so building highways and thoroughfares and streets to transport lots of traffic and cars, it was a way to do it. It was a way to do it. So a lot of people left Oberlin and they never returned.
Yep. She called her talk today redlining and urban removal. And one of the myths of redlining is that it was done by the banks. It was done by the federal government, and the federal government was telling the banks where they would guarantee a loan and where they would not. And she pulled out some of the things that were said about different neighborhoods. Kind of interesting for me to look at my own neighborhood in Durham, and it was in the category of definitely declining. And which explains why there were so many vacant lots in the neighborhood that never got built on, is because by the time you got out of, this was done 37, by the time you got beyond World War II, the banks would lend. And white neighborhood, but not far from a black neighborhood. So it was definitely declining, but it wasn't one of the red neighborhoods, which was the African-American neighborhood.
And you also had, at the last preservation conference I attended, you had the author of the book, and he spoke in depth about how redlining, how the government did it under the guise of doing something else. And I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, that's Richard Rothstein, the author of The Color of Law, and we have some copies of his book. If anybody wants to buy it, I could hand deliver it to your house, right?
Yeah.
Switch over. I've got some more just photographs. Let's go with we can go with the questions, and I'll just kind of slowly let you see the photographs, right? Okay. What were the bureaucratic hassles in preserving these houses? We don't have 2 hours to answer the questions. I'm sorry. It was just unbelievable, some of the things that we ended up having to go through. Even down to having to move one tree 1 foot. 1 foot. because I had the audacity to challenge the City of Raleigh person who said that we could not use multi-stem crepe myrtles. And as a former chairman of the Raleigh Appearance Commission, as an attorney, I said, please show me where in writing you have that authority. And he didn't. So his way of coming back was saying we had misplaced one of the trees by one foot. But it was, let me just kind of say, cutting some slack here. It was a complicated project every which way because it didn't, we're less than 5 feet from that boundary. We're less than 5 feet from that boundary because they're the boundaries. The front part of this house clips the back part of the boundary, and it's just cattywampus. But it was, it took 3 years from the first, well, actually it was pretty close to 3.5 years from the time we made our first application to the point we got our certificate of occupancy. It should not have remotely taken that, but I'm going to leave it there. Where's the square foot of the Graves house? Graves house is about 1,400 square feet. I think that, or
something like that.
yeah. Redlining still happens in the US. I don't doubt that. Tough moment. The Southern whites would refuse to acknowledge photograph of a black man giving dictation of a white woman. Oh man. Now, Andrea, I don't know if you want to comment on that one.
Well, it's like I said, if you think that you are superior to a person, place, or ethnicity, then you only want to see them doing manual labor. You want to see them doing dirty work, emptying trash, cleaning up after other people. You don't want to see them educated and smart and brilliant. And the thing about Paris, if you, I'm sure you do, back in, early on, they didn't have as much racial zippy going on as we did. A lot of jazz musicians went to Paris and they stayed there because they were treated better. People accepted them. And if they wanted to date people who were outside of their ethnicity, they could do that and they didn't have to worry as much. But in America, the African-American or the black man was supposed to, quote, stay in his place. And I can say today, I don't know what that place is because I'm just gonna do me, I'm gonna do what I do. And I would hope that with everything going on now that people would take a look and ask yourself, do you really want to go back to that time? Do you really want to go back to that? I mean, the fact that the secretary is white and she's taking dictation, it tells me that she's comfortable, that she feels comfortable around him. And I'm sure if she didn't think he knew what he was doing, that she would not have been
there. I'm with you, absolutely. Let me, couple more questions. The questions, there's several questions that have come in. One, the oak crest stained glass had a dot at the end of the name. Is that just a dot? It's just a dot. I'm sort of guessing it was to make 7 letters.
right.
Spread it out some way or another.
Yeah, knowing Willis Graves, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Ask about the cemetery. The cemetery is behind, I always think of the YWCA, but it's Interact.
Interact.
And the cemetery is behind that. And there's a brown city marker sign that has an arrow to get you over there. It's really interesting to look at. We know that the graves are buried there. Are your folks buried there?
No, my folks are at Carolina Biblical.
Okay. And then someone asked, let me get down here. Love to hear more about Oberlin School. Chuck, I have to kind of say we're running out of time. There's some interesting stuff written about it, and I could tell you a little bit more probably there's a biography of Charles Hunter, who was at one point the principal of Oberlin School. Oberlin School sat where the YWCA, the Anorak building, is in front of the cemetery, and it operated. It really shut down after the schools started being integrated. It was run by the people of Oberlin, built by the county in the early 20th century, and integration was the end for some Black schools all over, for many Black schools across the country, across the state, as white folks weren't going to go to the Black neighborhood to go to school, and Black folks in many cases wanted to go to the better education of the white school, although Oberlin School consistently tested better than the white schools as a whole in Raleigh. I mean, there were a number of things written about this as Charles Hunter was trying to get funding for his work here. This school was really quite remarkable. In terms of list of properties that PNC has saved, 850 some of them. I want to show you some photographs of what we have easements on here, covenants. Let's see the questions. Lucy Daniels, and if you would like to say something, you and Andrea have a conversation. Spurgeon Fields was a wonderful caretaker for my grandfather, Josephus Daniels, and he became a dear. I'm sure the next word was friend. And Andrea and I have talked a little bit about Josephus Daniels. I'm very frustrated. I am totally, absolutely ticked off with the city of Raleigh for opening the door for that house to be demolished so a developer can make money. That's all it's about. It has nothing to do with racial justice. It has to do with
money.
And do you, Andrea, you want to say anything further about the relationship of your grandfather and Josephus Daniels?
I'm befuddled because from what I read and what I have read, he was, and the articles you mentioned in the paper about, Willis Grace, a rather large man, and all that derogatory language that he talked about people of color. And the way he treated my grandfather, I mean, I have a hard time seeing how the two male, I see a parallel. My grandfather had a key to the Daniels home. He went and he came as he wanted to do things for them or get things for them, or they asked him to. For what my grandfather said, he said there was a private Mr. Daniels and there was a public Mr. Daniels. And he saw the private Mr. Daniels because he told me on many occasions, Mr. Daniels came to his defense and, and said, hey, this is what this is Spurgeon and da 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 da. And in other words, you might want to back away if you want to come and say something negative or do something that was not right to my grandfather. So I've read books, and I've talked to people, and so I'm still trying to figure out what internally was going on with him, because he had to have something inside that was, he was torn. Obviously, he was torn.
My little theory here, and it's just a theory, is what happened in the lead up to 1898 was the Democrats wanted, and bear in mind the Democrats and the Republicans have sort of switched sides here. Yeah. The Democrats wanted the Democrats lost the election of 1896, and they really wanted to win back the legislature. They would have to wait 2 more years to win back the governor's mansion. And it was kind of like they would tell any lie that they could make up to win elections. Now, does that somewhat sound
that's today
familiar? I mean, I don't want to, again, and you can say it on both sides of the aisle. Yeah. But they would say anything. And Josephus Daniels, the Josephus Daniels your father was close to would have been, that would have been fully a quarter century to a half century later.
Right.
1898, Josephus Daniels is still a fairly young man. And among other things, he was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's boss. You know, he was the person who brought Franklin Delano Roosevelt into the public domain, among other things. I'm going to do one quick more thing here. We're running behind time. I know it. Thank you for those of you who are sticking with us. Just do some real quick, see if the slides will cooperate. I'll show you some slides. This is my office. Interesting little twist is these windows that window does not match these windows. The trim under this window does not match the trim under these windows. The trim around the windows do not match the door across the hallway. They were using whatever they could come up with. Here's an example. This is round, this is round, this is oval, and the one on this one's oval. It's an elegant stair, but it's really quite tiny. It's a stair that only one person's going to go up and down on. You're not going to meet anyone in that stair. It's a beautiful stair, beautifully detailed, and yet again scaled back. There's the period since we've done the work on the house. Here's the Hall House. Hall House, the floors were shot from termite damage. They put an oak floor over a pine floor, and interestingly, it was the oak floor that took the damage, not the old pine floor, but there was enough damage and we just put a new pine floor over it. I need to finish out with, we moved a sculpture from the 1950s into the backyard here when it was going to be destroyed. It was our animal shelter work. Here's the artist George Morris with the little dog that his granddaughter had gotten at the state fair, and they made a little version and then he made a big version. We brought it, it was in North Raleigh. We brought it down. This gives you a sense of scale. We call him George after the artist, and he's more than 12 feet tall. I mean, there's our contractor who's 6 feet and change. And it's been a fun project to have that. This is very cool. Andrea got to meet Susan Mask, who's one of Lemuel Gray's granddaughters, and she's an artist, and she has developed a whole exhibit about looking at her family in Oberlin. This is in Seattle, and so very cool, very cool. There's a beer with a house in it. This year's Black History Month. I want to just say a quick thing about preservation easements, very quick, and that is we've seen some things destroyed in Cameron Park and elsewhere around the city that should not have been destroyed. If you have an interest in making sure your home or your business is protected, we do put contractual agreements in place that last longer than public protection. Give you examples of the houses around Raleigh that we have preservation easements on. Camp Hefner House, we approved the addition that's on the left there, which was done by Bob Burns, who used to live in Cameron Park. Richer House, designed by Matsumoto. Lane Bennett House, thought to be the second oldest house in Wake County, was going to get torn down. When we got involved with it, you can see up on the upper left. Conversion of a cotton gin into a private residence, which is very cool. Three heck houses of Oakwood. Why did it need an easement? Because it has a substantial piece of land behind it, and so it would have been entirely possible for someone to buy it, wait 365 days, and put 4 houses in. So we have an easement on that, easement on Second Empire Restaurant. Cameron Gatling House, which was on the market to be sold for 2 lots. We acquired it and found a buyer for it. It's one of the oldest houses in Oakwood. Democratic headquarters, we had Republican headquarters too. This is a case where a woman who was 102 did not like the tear downs that were taking place in the neighborhood. So she put an easement on her home. This is a building that was hit by the tornado and the city condemned it, and we were able to work out a deal to so the building could be saved and renovated. This is the first African-American Seventh-day Adventist church in North Carolina. This is on 3 acres of land, and any house in the city limits on 3 acres of land, you know what would happen if it were on the market without restrictions. Crabtree Jones house, which we moved and sold, and is absolutely gorgeous now. Montford Hall, that's going to be opening up soon. I do find it a little ironic that Josephus Daniels has hit the wall in terms of reputation, while meantime back at the ranch, the builder of this house was a huge slaveholder and a bit of an SOD. But it was a gorgeous house, and it's being renovated as an inn. And Greg Paul's been doing some of that work.
Beautiful.
Wizard House had been converted. I got to go. It got converted into a church, and then got converted back into a residence in the 70s, and now is going through a really expensive renovation. Our Brecht House, which was our headquarters, which we moved, we have easements on that. Easements on Cavendish House at the corner of our neighborhood. Our office was there for a number of years. Greg's building. And here are 4 final ones. Here are 4 more in Cameron Park that we have preservation easements on, or covenants. Actually, I think they're all a variation of easements or covenants. I think these are all easements. Again, easements are agreements that basically says you can't, I will not tear it down, and future owners of this property will not tear it down. And I will maintain it, future owners will maintain it. Additions will be reviewed, and we've reviewed a zillion additions through the years, but try to make sure that the house doesn't get taken over by Godzilla addition. And with that, I'll be glad to, if people want to stay and talk about easements, I'm happy to stay on, but I expect we've worn out our welcome. I really appreciate y'all's coming, but I super really appreciate Andrea joining me this evening. I mean, it's always such a treat, Andrea, to see you and have a chance to chat about things. We need to do it more often.
My pleasure, as always.
We really do appreciate it.
Always.
Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask Andrea about her grandfather's relationship with Josephus Daniels, but I think we got some of that answered already. And I just think it's really cool that both you and Lucy are in on this Zoom meeting right now. And tell us a favorite memory of yours from growing up in Oberlin. What do you appreciate about where you grew up?
The narrow staircase that Myron is talking about is very narrow. I mean, if you were of a certain size, you probably want to go up the stairs. But I was at the time I was the only grandchild, and I was spoiled rotten. I'm not happy to say, but I was. And I mean, whatever I thought I wanted, if I didn't think I wanted, I still got it. And so I had these 3 aunts, the 2, jolly, happy ones, and the other serious one. And I found out everything. I sat on the landing of that staircase, and the things that I heard, oh my goodness. I found out when my Uncle Ed was going to ask my grandfather to marry my Aunt Liv. And I told my grandparents, I said, oh, Ed's gonna ask Liv to marry him. And my grandmother said, how do you know? I said, because I heard him. I was on the steps. And she said, you need to stop sitting on those steps. And I said, I can, and then I found out, and when my aunts had a lot of boyfriends, and they would come to the house and they would, ask. And so one came to the house, and I said, oh my gosh, I said, is she gonna go out with him? And I said, I think his name was James something. And I said, why are you here? And I said, you can't go out with her. She went out with Henry. And my aunt said, you didn't tell him that. I said, you didn't tell me not to tell him. So I told everything, and I listened, and I learned a lot. And and my grandmother said, check the steps, check the stairs. She's probably on the landing. So and that's where I was. But the house was, it was a meeting place. And, knowing what I know now, how Graves designed it, that's what it was. I mean, if you could, my grandfather had this, it was the dining room. And behind the door in the dining room, there was a bar. And people would leave church and come over, and they say, oh, they're going behind the door. And so they'd go behind the door, and they'd have cocktails. And they did that, and my grandmother liked to cook oysters every Sunday, along with, she'd have cube steak, or just like dinner, I guess is what she'd have, but that's what she wanted. And so people would leave church and come over to my grandparents' house, and they'd go behind the door, and they'd eat what was left over from breakfast, and then they'd sit outside on the porch in the swing. I mean, it was just like an all day kind of thing. It was a great meeting place. And I love that about it. And when they moved the house, I was there, and they had a computer to move the house. And I remember crying that day. And someone asked me, well, why are you crying? I said, because this house moves. That's my life. My life is this house, because I grew up there. I lost my teeth, about 8 teeth. We were having breakfast, and my grandmother had scrambled eggs and bacon. And to this day, I don't eat scrambled eggs. And I was eating breakfast. And when I went to brush my teeth after breakfast, it's like, wow, what happened to my teeth? I swallowed my teeth. And so to this day, I don't eat scrambled eggs. And I was really upset. And I told my granddaddy, I said, what am I gonna do? That fairy's not gonna leave me any money. Oh, I'm just so hurt. And he said, well, don't you worry about it. And I said, well, I'm just worried because I swallowed them and I can't get them back, and da-da-da-da-da. Of course, I got the biggest haul of cash I ever could imagine the next day. She left me alone.
Andrea, I have a question for you. Do
Sure.
other members of your family, have they been there to see the restoration of the house?
Yes. Open house, they came. As a matter of fact, my brother, who went to Carolina undergrad, is a good friend of Susan Mask's husband. They were Carolina at the same time. Small world, you never know how your paths dwell, but they've come. And the room where Myrick is standing is my wallpaper, my screensaver for my tablet and my phone. I mean, that's because I have to, when I carry it around and I see it, it just makes me feel happy.
From personal experience, I know when I go back to my hometown, I always drive by the house that I grew up in.
Yes.
There's some pull there because there's so many memories.
Yes.
And it must really make you feel good to see what PNC under Myrick's direction has done to restore that.
Oh, I mean, I think they've done an excellent job. And,
Yes.
Once COVID goes wherever it's supposed to go, I like to have people, to come see it. And Myrick knows that I told him that whatever I can do to help or assist, be in, because it's a story that's worth telling, and it's a story that needs to be told. It's a story when people pass by the house and they go, well, why is this house there? It looks out of place. Well, that's why it's there, because it is out of place. Because people need to know that Oberlin was once a thriving community. And for us, my grandparents and my aunts, I mean, everybody in my family, education was always at the center. My granddaddy said, you have to get an education, because if you get an education, no one can take it from you. And, you know, when you get education, you have to buy some land, you have to have some land, you have to do da da da. And everything he told us was absolutely correct. So that Oakland for me was, it was my foundation. It's how I am today. It's why I am where I am today, and it's who I am because of it.
You have a lot to be proud of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andrea, it's great hearing some of your stories. Next time I'm in that building, I'm going to look at those stairs again and think about you being midway up there listening. Myrick, when are you you don't have a porch swing on that front porch, do you?
We don't. But we do have chairs on the porches, both porches. We've got a glider that we got to restore on one of the porches. And we've got chairs out on the deck. And anytime anybody wants to come and have lunch or whatever and sit out on the porches or have a drink out here, feel free.
I'm just thinking a porch swing in the exact same spot.
Yep.
Here's the little twist about that is we have to use that side of the porch as our access.
Oh.
We could put one on the other side and it would work, but in terms of where it was, we are putting a glider on the other house.
Okay.
On the whole house, which is going to be sort of fun. Porch swings I love. In a public setting, should we say our insurance company would probably clobber us. So it'd be a different thing if you're home. But but please do. I mean, folks, anytime y'all want to come, bring a drink over and sit on the porch. Look at the Oberlin Rising across the street.
Yes.
You know, and we are going to be putting a couple of interpretive signs out in front of the house probably in the next 6 weeks. And you know, and you will love this. We are also going to put an interpretive sign back where the puppy is in the backyard.
Cool.
For every day, I mean, I sit here and I watch people take pictures of the house and pictures of the house, pictures of the house, which is sort of cool. But then if I'm having lunch out back or on the, you know, in the conference room or on the deck, I will see at least twice as many people taking pictures of themselves with their dog in front of George. So we're going to put an interpretive panel. You know, he's old enough to be on the National Register. So
Go
just
George.
saying.
Okay, well, I just want to add my thanks to Myrick and Andrea for coming. It was a wonderful presentation, great pictures, great stories, and I'm with Mike. I mean, next time I walk down that road, I'm going to be picturing your family out on the porch. I'm going to picture your aunt up in that window smoking so your father doesn't smell the smoke. It just adds so much richness to those of us who live close by and can see it. So thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Just Marty, you want to make an announcement, right?
Sure. Yeah, I want to let you know that we do have a student, our NCSU student with us just until the end of April. So if any of you are interested in getting tech support with any of your electronic gadgets, computers, Androids, Google Docs, etc., give me a call. I'm going to forward my phone number, I hope. So you can see that it's 919-346-4992, 919-346-4992. And hopefully you'll stay long enough to complete the feedback form for our student as well. I know some older folks who are kind of ambivalent, excuse me, that are kind of ambivalent about technology. They're not sure they want to learn anything or not. So if you've been one of the people who were thinking, oh, or not, I don't think so, but now want to think, hey, you can get this free of charge and it'll be good education for our students to get to know you and might be helpful to you as well. Do give it a try. And our student is there, Iana Torres. You can see her waving her hand. That's who would be helpful to you. So just give me a call. Thank you.
So Marty, you put in the wrong phone number.
I didn't.
You did.
How is that possible?
You put a 5 instead of a 4.
5992.
You're
is it?
right. Absolutely correct. I'm so sorry. It's 4992. 4992. So I can't erase, but at least we can, thanks, Lee, for correcting me on that one.
No problem.
Okay. Oh, and just one more, don't forget, we do have one more forum, May 11th. Everyone is invited. It's the pros and cons of options for internet, TV, and telephone service. Something we all need to know about. So join us if you can. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Jane, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Really
Thank
appreciate it.
Take care, behave.
Do my best.
We'll try.
Or not, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.